Welcome to the fundamentals section of the course. In this section, we're finally going to get to writing valid VBA code in the Visual Basic Editor. But before we get there are some other fundamentals that I want to cover. I know that this material may be a bit more dry, a bit more technical and boring, but it's important to lay a good foundation here because if we're willing to invest our time and energy up front, it's going to pay off a lot when we start applying these ideas to more technical concepts within VBA. I want to begin here with a discussion of object-oriented programming. What is that? Well, as I mentioned before, VBA is an object-oriented programming language. Object-oriented programming is a development paradigm, which just means a way of thinking that views a software application as a collection of objects that talk with and interact with each other. The first question you probably have is, okay, what is an object? Well, an object is some kind of entity. It's a data structure. It's some kind of thing. If you take a look at the objects around you, the real world objects that you see, you may see a computer, you may see a lamp, a bed, a drawer. We as humans are able to differentiate between these things. These objects are different entities that we recognize, and we can do different things with these objects, and these objects also have different attributes about them. Code and the computer have a similar design concept, right? Excel needs the ability to differentiate between different data structures. What are some of the objects that we might run into in Excel? Well, you can think about a workbook versus a worksheet versus a cell range. Excel needs to be able to differentiate between these things, much like we as humans differentiate between these things. And that's accomplished in programming terms by identifying each one of those things as a separate object, right? It's just a different thing within the context of the application. Each object has its own set of properties and methods, okay? A property is like an attribute, a detail, or a characteristic about an object. A property defines what the object looks like and how it acts. It's some kind of characteristic about it. You can think of it almost like a passive detail, right? It's not an active activity that we're doing with the object. It's something that describes the object's state. In comparison, a method is an action or a command that we can do with an object or on an object. I know that right now these ideas are very high level, so what I want to do over the next couple of slides is to apply these principles to a couple real life objects to kind of give you a better understanding of what I mean when I say properties and methods. A really good way to think about it is in the context of language. An object is like a noun. A noun is a person, place, or thing, right? You can think about, again, the objects around us, a water bottle, a refrigerator. These are objects. They're things that we can interact with. Those objects have properties which are details about the object, right? Properties in the context of language are like adjectives. That car, which is an object, is red. Red is describing the color of the car. So color can be thought of as a property and red can be thought of as a value. A method is like a verb. It is an action. What can we do with a car? We can drive a car, right? We can fix a car. We can sell a car. So an object is like a noun, a property is like an adjective. It's some kind of descriptive way that we can talk about the object and what it looks like. And a method is something that we can do with the object. It's a verb. Let's reinforce these concepts with a couple other real-life objects. So here I have three objects. I have a book, I have an apple, and I have a basketball. And I want you to think about some of the properties or characteristics that these three objects might have, as well as some of the methods, which are the things that we can do with these objects. And here's a few that I came up with. Feel free to come up with some more of your own. There's no right or wrong answer here. So what are some of the properties that I can see on a book? Well, a book will have a name, a book will have an author, it will have a certain number of pages, and it will have a price. Notice that none of these things are things that I do with a book, right? These are not verbs that I would ever use when writing something about a book. These are rather details that describe what the book is like, what its shape is like, what its structure is like, what its state is like. In comparison, methods related to a book, things that I can do with the book include reading. I can read a book, I can sell a book, and I can trade a book. Let's dive into another example with an apple. An apple may have a property of a color. That value of that property may be red, just like an adjective. An apple may have a red color. Variety, the type of apple that we're dealing with, is another property. An apple may be a Granny Smith apple, it may be another kind of apple. An apple may have a price property. That price can be 99 cents, it can be 49 cents. Different apples can have different price values. Again, properties are just characteristics that describe what the object is. A price is not something that we can necessarily do with an apple. It just describes the apple. What can we do with an apple or with any object? What we can do is what we call the methods. So methods related to a real-life apple are eating it, we can slice it, and we can wash it. Finally, with a basketball, some of the properties I can think of on a basketball, it has a color, orange, it has a weight, 3 pounds, and it has a company that makes it. Some of the things we can do with a basketball, some methods, we can throw a basketball and we can sell a basketball. An important thing to notice here is that different objects can share the same properties. For example, the book and the apple both have a price property. In real life, nobody would confuse a book for an apple. They're two different objects, they're two different entities, they're two different things, but they both may have similarities. They may both have a price. Similarly, objects may have the same methods. For example, the book and the basketball both have a sell method. A book is a totally different object from the basketball, but they can both be sold. We can both do the same thing to them. Objects may have unique properties, they may have shared properties or identical properties. Objects may have unique methods that are exclusive to them, and they may also have shared methods. To conclude this lesson, I want to dive into a little bit of the technical syntax that we'll be using in VBA when we're dealing with objects. So let me just bring up this slide right here. This is a lot to take in, so by no means do you have to memorize all this stuff right now. I just want to introduce you to the syntax so it's not going to feel as awkward when we throw all this stuff at you a little bit later, okay? So there's 3 things that we can do here. We can get a property, we can set a property, and we can call a method. The syntax for getting a property value, which means finding out a characteristic about an object, looks like this. We have an object, we have a dot, and then to the right of the dot, without any spaces, we have the name of the property. You can see that in the middle of the table right here. So let's take a look at the 2 examples in the right-hand column. Let's say we have a book and a basketball object in the context of a program like VBA. A book, as I mentioned, may have an author property. It's a characteristic about the book. And we can reference that property. We can get the value by writing the name of the object, book, then a dot, then the property name, which is author. And that will return to us an author, like, let's say, George Orwell. Similarly, if we have a basketball object, we can reference a color property on it with that dot syntax. Object, then a dot, then the property on the object that we want to access, and that will give us a value like a basketball color, let's say, is orange, okay? Now, predictably, if an object doesn't have a property, then we're going to run into an error, but we can dive into that a little bit later. Some object properties are what we call read-only, and that means that they can only be read. We can only get them, we can't change them. For example, in real life, a book will always keep the same author, right? However, there are some object properties that can be overwritten. They're not read-only, they can also be written, right? We can read them, we can write them. That means that new values can be set. For example, a book may have a price right now, but that book's price can also change when the shopkeeper decides to give it a different price. A basketball may have a color of orange, but we can always pick up the basketball and paint it and give it a new color of black, right? So some properties can be overwritten. The syntax to set a property value, to give an object property a new value, is very similar. On the left-hand side, we're going to have the object, a dot, and the property. And then unlike the syntax for getting a property, we're going to write an equal sign, and then on the right-hand side, the new value that we want to assign. So let's take a look at the 2 examples here. If we do just book.price, we're going to get the current price property of a book, which is going to be some kind of number. If we want to overwrite that, if we want to set the price property to something different, we do book.price equals, and on the right-hand side, the new value, which let's say arbitrarily is $14.99. Similarly, if we want to change the value of the color property on a basketball object, we would do the object, basketball, dot, the property, which is color, an equal sign, and the new value on the right, which in this case is black. I want you to notice here that black is written in double quotes, and this is very important. When we have something written in double quotes, in programming terms, we call that a string. A string represents a collection of text or characters. So anytime you're going to be writing words, things with spaces, names, you're going to be using strings. And whenever you write a string, you need to do double quotes. You do not need to do double quotes if you're doing things like numbers, as we have here with $14.99, with either floating point numbers with decimals or whole number integers. But whenever you're using some kind of text as a property, like a name, you're going to have to use double quotes. We're going to repeat this many times, so don't worry about memorizing it now. Finally, we have a syntax for calling or invoking a method on an object. And when I say call a method, I just mean to run it, to execute it, to tell the object, hey, you have this functionality, you have this ability, I want you to do it, okay? The syntax is exactly the same as it is to get a property value. It's going to be the object followed by a dot, followed by the method on the object that we want to execute or call. You might be looking at these syntax options and saying, but hey, the object property syntax for getting a property value is very similar to the object.method syntax for calling a method. And you're absolutely correct. The syntax is essentially identical. We have to ourselves know whether we're calling a method or getting the value of a property, because VBA is not always going to tell us, okay? But the syntax is going to be very similar. Let's take a look at these two examples. Again, these are real-life objects. These are not things that exist in VBA, but just like we have apple and basketball here, we're going to be applying these concepts later to a workbook or a worksheet. So in order to invoke the eat method on an apple, we write the object, apple, a dot, followed by the word eat. We have basketball, the object, a dot, and then the word throw, which is the method, what we're asking the object to do, okay? This is a very big picture overview of objects, methods, and properties. And in the next lesson, the assignment, what I want you to do is to take some of these concepts and apply them to the real-life objects around you. Hopefully that will give you a better sense of the ideas that are being discussed here. And once you start thinking about real-world objects in this sense, it's going to be a lot easier to apply these concepts to VBA objects in our environment, okay? So I look forward to seeing you in the next lesson, and get ready to tackle your very first assignment.